Hi everyone, my name's Adam.
And I'm Zane, and this is A to Z, where we cover any topic from A to Z.
So, being that this is our first VOD, things might be a little bit stumbly, but that's okay. So, we'll get through it with all of you. The purpose of these are really to cover any topics that are pertinent to us in the MTG community. Granted, these are going to be our opinions, they're not going to be absolute fact. Rather, both of us, as we continue to learn and progress through the game and navigate our way through the community, we're just seeking to have a platform where we can answer some questions that have been asked of us in our streams, as well as in many other places. So, personally, for both of us, we are versed in modern and in limited right now. We are seeking to go into more legacy and standard for me at least. So as we navigate through those, we'll give you our opinions on the metagame, individual cards, any trends that we see or don't see.
Yeah, I have some experience with Standard. I've played in some Standard GPs. Not to any amazing success. I've had some day twos with Standard GPs, but Standard is what my least of the three. But definitely uh, an exciting experience to share with you. And so, speaking of formats, many people ask us, what deck do you want to select in these formats? Being streamers, we have people come into our chats say, I'm starting playing this format, modern. What deck do you think you should suggest to me? And what is the first question you ask them?
I usually ask them, what do you normally play? I like, what's your play style? I know Z, you have currently a more aggressive play style.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of range everywhere. I trend more towards aggro combo. So my deck of choice generally is Infect. It's known by everybody, and if you don't know, basically it just tries to deal 10 infect damage as quickly as humanly possible. um, I also play a litany of other decks like Jund, and I'll play Mardu and Affinity very terribly, unlike Z over there. But I'm still trying to find specifically what my groove is. I know I trend much more towards aggro. I played Burn for a very long time. I just ended up getting a little bored with the deck after playing it for 3 or 4 years in a row of match after match after match of doing the same exact thing.
Right.
Um, so I started playing into combo. I went into ad nauseum for a while. I'm thinking about getting back into that as well. But yeah, it's all based on your playstyle, what your strengths and weaknesses are within a specific deck. I know that Z, you can probably talk a little bit more about this in your passage through finding affinity as your main deck.
Right. So there are two ways to approach any deck searching. I like to call it. Um, One is that you know your playstyle. You know you're an aggressive player. You like to beat down. You like to crush your opponents before they have the chance to respond. Another is you can be more reactive. You can play a mid range game, kind of like a Jun type game, or like you play some threats, you remove some things, and you play this give and go kind of game, like tempo almost. Tempo mid range, somewhere in that range. Um, you can also play more controlling, where you just don't allow your opponent to do anything, and you just eventually win with a threat. So that brings up just me addressing those. That brings up a question a lot of people have is like, what are the playstyles? What are some of the playstyles?
For me, I usually break it down into two, or I should say three. There are three major play styles I have. You have the aggro, as you said, with the just bash face kind
Mm-hmm.
of mentality. Burn falls into this where you don't really care what the opponent is doing. You just
Right.
want to do your thing as quickly and as efficiently as possible. The other one is control, where you're essentially, instead of playing your deck, you start playing the opponent's deck in a lot of instances. This control, I think, is one of the harder decks to learn because you really need to know specifically what you're playing against and what cards and the probabilities of them drawing it. You have to have a very intricate knowledge of any deck that you may face, which is why control has at times it has trouble against those types of rogue decks
Mm-hmm.
because they don't know how to prepare best for it and they don't know what's in your deck. And the final one is combo. I know like there's mid range and mid range control and mid range aggro.
And that all
Um,
fits into that circle
yeah,
model if you look at a circle.
Yeah, the last one really is combo, and there are very few pure combo decks in modern right now. Ad nauseum is one of them. Storm is another one. Um, Infect is considered a combo deck as well. Combo is probably the hardest one I would say to
Hmm.
master because you have to know specifically when you're able to go off. There have been numerous matches that I've had with Infect and also with Ad nauseum where you think you have it and you know you can go for it and
Right.
then it gets countered or in terms of in fact the creature gets returned to your hand or just one little thing messes it up and that's why I think combo is probably the hardest one to master. It's probably easier to learn but really hard to master.
Okay. And what about the common misconception that aggro is easy?
I always hate when people say that. Well, honestly, any deck in Magic is hard.
Right.
Any deck
Right.
in Magic is hard to
Hard to
learn and
master.
hard to
Hard
master.
to master. Sometimes easy to learn.
I was playing a burn match the other night off stream, and I wish I would have recorded it because it was interesting. Um, I knew that the opponent had Spellskite in hand.
Hmm.
I knew that the opponent we're playing Bantel versus Banteldrazi, and I
Okay.
knew that the opponent had Thought Knot Seer. So instead of saying, okay, I have two Atarka's Command and a Searing Blaze in hand, I'm just going to keep bashing face as much as possible. It wasn't really the best choice because Thought Knot Seer gets rid of one. Granted, I can draw into another burn spell, but that's not a certainty. And Spellskite just redirects consistently, other than the Atarka's Command.
Correct.
So it went. I attack on my turn, put them to 8. They play out Spellskite because this was they were mana screwed for a minute, and so they played out Spellskite. Then I attacked again, and I Searing Blaze the Spellskite to get rid of it. But I had enough mana to cast out the Tarkus command, but I chose not to because it didn't change my clock, and it also let me kill the um, the Thought Knot Seer
Right.
off of
Right.
any burn spell that I
Hmm.
got. And I also had a Nactil, so if they blocked the sorry Nacatl or
Yes. Yeah.
whatever you
I know.
say,
Yeah.
um, so if they block the Nacatl, then I can pump with the Atarka's command and still deal the 3 damage and get rid of the Thought Knot Seer and do that. So there are lines in aggro that are
Exactly.
complicated at times. Like I could have just tried to cast out my entire hand and say, "There you go, you have one life," but they can stabilize.
Hmm.
So I think aggro is probably one of the harder.
I mean, you just can't make a mistake
Yeah.
most of the time. Like if you make one mistake, it costs you the game. I know that playing Affinity for years. I mean, you make one mistake, it costs you the game. But just that's just a side note there. Going back to selecting decks. You know, I I mean, I guess I'm an established aggressive player now. I played a Burn on. I started streaming with Burn, and I've been playing Affinity for 2.5, 3 years now. I
Why did you leave Burn?
I just why did I leave? No, I mean, I never. I always wanted to get to that Affinity route, my roots. So just I really like that aggressive playstyle now, but it hasn't always been that way. Like I started playing more competitive Magic around Return to Ravnica. That's when I started going to FNMs, and I started actually starting to build decks and play in just FNMs and small tournaments. But it just was getting my feet wet, and that was when I started Modern because I saw how cool Standard was, and but then I saw Modern and I was like, wow, that format there's that cool artifact deck, and so I've always loved artifacts. I
Was that back when Affinity was actually Affinity?
Yeah, yeah.
And it played like
It played
Mirror
four.
Enforcer and
No, it was a little after that time, but it did
okay,
play four Thoughtcast still. It was the standard was to play four Thoughtcast still.
okay.
It was a much tinier deck. It ran a lot of zero drops in that version. It was all
Yeah,
about
because you had the Memnites and
and the Balding Jar. Yeah.
yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
So it was much different back then, but and then that was because there was such a large representation of American control at that time. And like you just that deck had all removal spells, so playing all these 1/1s was very important, so you could crush them. Uh,
Also known as Jeskai Control now.
yes, yes.
Just
No, yeah,
names change, but idea is still the same.
yes, exactly. But I just was like, oh, these artifacts are cool. Steel Overseer, and everything was cheap then, by the way. So I tried a few decks, um, and I mean to just show how relatively cheap Modern was at that time. I built my Affinity deck for everything except the Mox Opals was $250 maximum. Um,
What is it now? About
it's about
700?
800 to 1,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I built Affinity and I just loved it. I was very very bad at it, but it doesn't matter. Like that's what I played it and I played it and I played it and then I played other things in Modern. When Treasure
Oh,
Cruise was legal, I played Grixis. I tried things because I didn't know what my playstyle was. I played like Grixis Delver, very tempo deck. I tried Esper Control. I tried like a 5-color zoo, 4-color zoo. I tried, with the Geist Draft and stuff like that. I tried these different styles, and I saw, you know what? I just really like beating down. I like to end on like turn 4 max, and then I also like to have breaks. So this is a big thing. I was starting to go to big tournaments, and I was like, what deck? And I was like getting exhausted, getting exhausted. And I said, what decks can I play that give me good breaks? So every time I go to a standard tournament, still now, I say, what deck is in my playstyle? And then I say, what deck can give me the most amount of breaks in my playstyle? And then it's not a laziness thing. That is an intentional
no, it's a
it's
strategy.
stamina thing because I know I don't have a very long stamina for mental acuity and stuff like that, like and accuracy. But I know if I select the right deck, I can make decisions in the match that I can take longer times to make those decisions because I know that there aren't a lot of triggers or I don't have to just like spend 20 turns until I win. So that's a big consideration for me nowadays.
Yeah, see, I don't have the ability right now to play in tournaments or pro tours or anything like that
Hmm.
or GPs or anything along those sorts. I think it's interesting though because streaming in general, Magic Online, because it's so on demand,
Hmm.
gets way more tiring than like a GP in my mind would. Because your mind is always just game match, this match, this match, this match, and it's not.
It's tiring in a different way.
I think that's why I get tired of decks like Burn and Infect at times, and this is why I think I've been kind of laying off them a little bit
Okay.
because you play, on an average stream, I can play anywhere from 20 to 30 matches of Infect or
Yeah.
Burn, and it just it gets tiring. You start playing a lot
Well, that's where you see
more
that's where
careless.
you see you're playing for a certain amount of time versus you're playing a certain amount of matches, and I think that is a different kind of factor for the exhaustion and then the like the um.
The need to just kind of sit back and
Mhm.
just say, okay, I need to like reset my mind real quick.
Correct.
There's just another consideration too, especially on MTGO in selecting a deck. It's time management. How well can you
Mm.
manage your time
Yep.
on Moto? Where I see people playing Lantern Control every once in a while. For those of you who don't know, Lantern Control is probably one of the most frustrating decks to play against. It is also one of the most difficult decks to learn and to really know all of your lines before you even do them.
Right.
I see numerous people, they pick it up, they start playing it, and then they come back and like, hey, I keep running out of time.
Right.
And it's the same thing with Esper Drago, if anybody plays that anymore. But those decks aren't very prevalent on Moto because it takes so long to go through everything. I mean, you're not talking about turn 4, turn 6, turn 10. You're talking about turn 24,
Right.
25.
Right.
Like one game, I remember playing Esper Control, and one game of the match took both my opponent and I, my opponent was on Jund, my opponent and I think it was 15 minutes off of my clock and 12 minutes off of their clock to finish game one.
Mhm.
So, I mean, you're already left with less time on your clock than you started with, like, for the
Yeah.
entire match. and you're going into game 2. And if you win, then you have to figure out, okay, well, since I won, now I have to win game 2, or I have to concede very quickly in order to allow myself enough time to actually get to a game 3.
Yeah, I don't know
Uh,
if you've ever played if you've played Magic Online when Sphinx's Revelation was a big card and when that was in standard, but I didn't actually play that, but I remember watching a lot of videos then, and I had a lot of friends that played. And the big thing about Sphinx's Revelation when it was in standard, that blue-white Sphinx's Rev deck that would cycle through with the relic, the like a sort of immortality, was that
yeah,
mirror was incredibly awful online, and basically whoever won game one
won
won
the
the
match.
match. Yep.
Yeah,
Whoever
because I mean
won,
those decks they take so long to win, and
whoever
it's not
was,
a
and
bad thing.
whoever played faster basically would win,
Yeah,
and you just had to be the faster player. And I think that is a consideration. Like I don't play slow to control decks, not because I can't click fast enough, but because I can't make decisions fast enough. Because I'm not used to those type of decisions. I'm used to the
yeah. I
and
know, and that goes to your skill level as well. And not saying like some players are good, some players are bad.
right.
I'm not saying anything about any individual player, but a buddy of mine said, "Hey, I'm gonna go and pick up what they want to pick up, Dredge." They're like, "I'm gonna go pick up Dredge." I'm like, "Okay, you want to go pick up Dredge and you play a control deck?" I was like, you know how Judge works. Yes, they're like, yes, I know how the deck operates, this and that. They did the research, they watched videos and stuff like that. And they went to play it, then they went 0-5. And they're like, I don't understand what happened. I'm like, well, your skill level with it, with this specific deck, isn't very high. So you don't
Mm,
know, how your deck reacts to things. I think on stream even today, I was playing Merfolk and Captain Merfolk, and there are times when I'll just say, "Hey, I'm just going to trust my deck. I'm going to trust my deck because I know my probability of drawing into a winning card." And
right.
when that winning card I know is like an 80% probability of getting there, I'm just going to go and play out as best as possible and just say, "I'm going to tap out," even though because whatever they play won't matter at that point in time. Because I know that a card that wins is 80% likely to be on the top of my deck. It's all about just your skill level with the deck, not how good of a player you are, or bad of a player you are, or anything else. How long you've been playing. I mean, I've been playing on and off since 2000.
Hmm.
I left Magic for a while actually. I took about a 7-year break. It just it kind of all consumed my life for far too long, and I stopped right around eighth when eighth edition came out, and then came back in during cons. So I missed the entire
Hmm.
lifespan of modern by the time that I got back. Like entire
Yes.
lifespan. I
Yes.
stopped playing at seventh edition essentially.
Yeah.
Um, so I needed to learn.
The entire card pool.
Yeah. So what I did was I researched a set every single day, and I researched every card in that set. Um, I can tell you that uh, the Kamigawa block is terrible to try and to research because there's just so much that goes on with the flip cards and everything else, and how everything is legendary and the changes to the legendary rule. Because back when I played it, it
Yeah.
was still a different thing. Um,
Where they get you can only have one of each,
yeah.
and
So like, I play. I don't know. Name a legendary card.
uh,
Rurik Thar. Like
yes.
I name. Like I play Rurik Thar. You wouldn't be able to play another Rurik Thar. Like it'd get sacrificed. So like,
Well, they would both get sacrificed.
yeah, it would just be a removal thing.
Yeah.
So now that it's different, like I had to learn that. I had to learn
That
like,
it nerfed clones. It nerfed Phantasmal Image.
yep.
All those things.
So there's just so many things that involve your skill, but not just your skill, but your familiarity with what's going on.
Hmm.
I know people who pick up even Burn at times. They're like, man, I keep losing with Burn. I'm like, Burn is a tier 1 deck for a reason. It wins. It wins often.
Right.
It has a couple bad matchups, but in general, it does win. And it depends on how familiar you are with the deck. Like, I know a lot of people get confused with Spellskite, especially with against Infect, and currently with Burn. Is I cast Lava Axe, or sorry, Lava Spike. They try to redirect to Spellskite, but that doesn't work. So if you know you're playing against a Spellskite deck, you don't cast out lightning, like you don't cast out your your Lava
Lava Spike
Spikes before
first. Yes.
before your lightning bolts. Even if you're doing it on your turn or not, it doesn't matter because you know that they have Spellskite. So you want to, like, same thing with the Tarkus command. The Tarkus command can't be redirected because it's
Skullcrack
each
as
opponent.
well. Boros Charm.
Yeah, like
All these
those.
spells.
Yeah, those types of spells, because they say player, they can't target the Spellskite. So
Hmm.
again, as I said, it's more of your familiarity with the cards, with the deck, with in your general skill level with it. I know that people sometimes, uh, with like leveling and stuff like that, there are times when people will sit there and be like, "Oh, well, I played this deck for X amount of time," and someone will pipe in and say, "Oh, you're clearly like a level 10 with the deck,
Hmm.
versus a level 1 or something like that." I think it's a good way to think about it though. Like, I mean, ad nauseum, I'm probably about a 5 or 6. Burn, I'm probably about a 6, 7. In fact, I'm probably about 7, 8.
Right.
Uh, with you and Affinity, you're probably what 8, 9, 10, somewhere in
Yeah,
that range.
probably an
But
8.
I mean, there are always things to learn. There are always things to master better.
Right,
And
right.
while you progress through that, though, it's the same thing with me. Is I try to learn and I try to watch other people who have played it longer and discuss what the proper lines are. I think I went on your stream the one time and I said I've been playing Affinity and I'm terrible.
Yeah.
Explain to me why I am terrible. Like absolutely atrocious. And it's because the way that I was progressing through the cards was incorrect.
Hmm.
And it wasn't just like, yeah, I spit out my hand and then I win. It's you spit out some of your hand and see what the other person is doing before you just say, hey, look, I'm just gonna do this and show you everything I have.
Yeah, I remember being on your stream and watching you. I mean, I also remember being on other people's streams and watching them. And I see this line, and I see the sideboard. Like, and I'm not saying I'm the most expert Affinity player, but I have experience, and I know the cards that. The important thing to when you're selecting a deck is that you know what cards are weak for that deck. When you select your deck, you say what cards are important in my deck to play and what order am I supposed to play them, but also what cards are very bad for my deck to see, and what cards for against my deck do I need to interact in a certain manner with. So, for instance, um, let's interact with something like the affinity mirror, right? So you have to say how my cards interact with their cards, and it's that sort of thing. Like, what are my most powerful cards in this matchup? When you're selecting a deck, you need to either research those things, test to figure out those things, um, read
Clearly, you bring
articles
in
about
Whip
those
Flare, right?
things. Yeah, clearly you bring in the Whip Flare in the Affinity matchup. For those that don't know what Whip Flare does, Whip Flare is 1 in a red, sorcery, deal 2 damage to each non-artifact creature. So
So
it's
clearly, that's what you want in the mirror, right?
clearly, obviously, amazing in the Affinity Mirror.
It's like Anger of the Gods, but so much better.
But except only for their things. I mean, oh
Yeah.
wait. So I think that's a very important thing, and that's what I try to do whenever I select. Because I don't often select decks for Modern anymore. I sometimes do, but my what I mostly select nowadays is Standard decks because I'm not a huge fan of Standard. But there are a lot of standard GPs and a lot of standard PPTQs and that those sort of events that I like to go to, and I don't go to that many. I probably go to once a month, but just the fact that I need to select a deck for those, um, and this is something I did improperly for Providence, is I chose a deck that was sort of aggro, but it was a little bit too much combo, but I didn't have enough iterations with the deck. And I also did not know how my deck interacted with certain cards correctly. So an important thing for me to do when I am selecting a deck is I say, how are these cards that my opponents have going to interact with my deck? So just knowing the rest of the decks in the field is important when selecting your deck.
We're going to cover that next week, I think, and
Right.
when we navigate our modern leagues, well,
Right.
specifically modern leagues.
Just
Um,
pointing just pointing towards that a little
oh
bit.
yeah, yeah. No, I get that. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I don't play standard right now. Is I am not versed enough. Like I know what all the cards are in Kaladesh. I've
Yeah.
drafted enough. I've done sealed enough. I've done every limited format that you can buy. I think I'm entered into 3 different limited formats, like all the leagues, every single league I'm in right now, and I would never. I don't think I'll ever select a standard deck to play because I'm just not versed in it. And
I
I
mean, you
took a
have to.
break actually between I took a break between Oath of the Gatewatch and probably right about until Kaladesh. Like
Yeah.
I kind of stopped playing. I played some of the Eldritch Moon. I played some Shadows over Innistrad, but I didn't play that heavily.
Well, even if you like knew the cards, standard is an ever-changing format, right?
Yeah,
Modern is too, but let's be real. Standard is the ever-changing format, and
let's be real.
it's designed that way. It's designed to change every few months. So if you do not keep up with that format,
Yeah,
and that's a deck format you have to keep selecting decks for. So when a new set comes, the question is always, what is my new deck going to be for this? Well, for a lot of people, it's hope there's mono red in the format, which actually is not me. I don't actually like playing mono red in standard, but
you're not like playing mono red.
mono
Any
red in standard, apart from like Atarka's command era, it hasn't been strong since then, and I don't really like playing it because it just falls off, and you die to your own draws a lot of time because the inconsistency of standard.
You know what my last standard deck was that I actually played
The
in like
Goblin Guide deck.
FMs? No, I wasn't playing during
Oh,
Goblin
right,
Guide
right,
series.
right.
No, my last standard deck that I actually played in any event, like FNM or anything,
Okay.
was Blue White Pillow Fort
Oh, that one was
back in
strong.
Khans
I remember
Dragons,
that one. That was strong.
where you had like Stasis Snare and like every single like pacifism
Yeah, that
and,
deck was really annoying and didn't really do anything.
and then you had Starfield and Nyx and Sigil of the Empty Throne.
See,
And those were what's up?
I played Mardu Control then.
Yeah, no, I played Pillow Fort.
Okay.
And the reason why I played Pillow Fort was because I got fed up with standard. Um, primarily because like the green white hardened scales deck was so good.
Mm-hmm.
And
Very
like
powerful.
there were decks that just started dominating, and Collected Company was just around for so long.
Yes.
Like it dominated when it was in cons too, because it's just so good.
I mean, it kept getting better creatures and better creatures. And it got
Yeah, I
better
mean,
and better.
you can only print so many creatures before you're just like, all right, this card is kind of nuts because it is.
I mean,
And
that was the problem with Birthing Pod in Modern was the Birthing Pod was only going to get better the more sets were printed.
yeah,
People were really upset about the banning, but the card was only going to get better when with the cards it printed. It printed Siege Rhino, made it super powerful, and like it had reach. The deck had reach, and it's just like it had a lightning helix you could search for, like it from a kitchen finks. Like I don't, it's a lot, and it was only going to get better because there's not because the creatures are only, always getting better, but because there are better creatures for that slot. And you see the same thing with collected company decks. They only continue to get better.
well, Coco hasn't really been broken in modern yet.
Right. Well, it was
Yet.
broken for a little of a phase. There was a little bit of that was very strong.
Yeah, but I think it's getting more hate from Dredge because
Right.
of Grafdigger's Cage. So I think because Grafdigger's Cage is in a lot of sideboards now.
Mhm.
But off topic.
Yeah, off topic.
We like to do that though. We start talking and then we start talking about things that
It's
are
okay.
off topic. I
Keep
think
it-
the last. I really think that the last consideration that you should have when selecting your deck is the cost restriction of it.
Mhm.
I know like Jund is like what $1,400 or something like that to put on paper. Higher than that, I haven't followed
Tarmogoyfs
paper
are like
prices.
120 a piece. Just that alone, and
Wow,
Liliana's are
only
like
120
100.
a piece. How about that? I remember when they were 200 a piece.
They're like they're a little bit more than 120, I
I
think.
think they were 140 last time I checked.
I
But
don't know, but they're over 100. Lilianas are really expensive still. All the fetch lands. You're looking at like a $2,000 deck.
okay, so 2 grand. Online, it's about 1,200, give or take.
Yeah.
Anywhere from like 9 to 1,200. Do you want to buy into a deck like that? It depends. When I started when I started building my collection on MTGO, it started with it actually started with Merfolk. to be honest with you. And then after that, it
I
moved
wouldn't have guessed.
into, well, I wanted to learn how to play Merfolk.
Oh,
So
okay, that's fair.
I already had, in fact, I already had like those types of things. I already had
Mhm.
burn. I know that my camera's kind of like, I gotta move it over a little bit. There we go.
Why does it move like that?
I don't know. It's your program. You set it up. Because I'm very animated,
Oh, okay.
most likely. So it's trying to find a center.
Okay.
Anyway, um, no, I started with Merfolk and then I bought into Infect because I sold my entire online collection for
Mhm.
something crazy, and then I sold all my paper stuff too because I knew I didn't have time to play paper anymore. But when I started really trying to build every deck possible, I started with Jund because if you build Jund, you can go into Abzan. If you go into Abzan, you can go into like Eldrazi, Eldrazi and taxes, because
Mhm.
you're getting all of that mana base over with, which is usually about 50% of a modern deck, give or
Yeah.
take.
Yeah.
I know, like in fact, Inkmoth Nexuses are still expensive,
Yeah.
and Noble Hierarchs are still expensive, and technically it's part of the mana base too. Um, but yeah, Jund and Abzan both kind of are pretty close. They, at least the Abzan control version of it,
Mhm.
and not the junk version of it.
Right.
And after that, you just start. You know, I started just building out. So I started with one deck, and then moved on to the next deck. And there are very few decks in Modern right now, at least in the tiered like tournament style decks, that don't kind of overlap in some way or another.
Yeah.
Like the
The
only outliers
exceptions
are
are
like what, Dredge.
affinity, like only overlaps with one card in the main deck, which
Well,
is.
I mean, I built pure steel
Oh, okay.
the pure steel paladin deck, so that kind of actually overlapped more so than usual.
But a
Um,
lot of decks don't overlap with affinity or lantern control. Lantern control's a lot of overlap. It's like Merfolk and Affinity are like the outli and Elves are the outliers.
I obviously still have Cavern of Souls.
Oh, I guess so. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Oh, if you're talking about mana base.
So yeah, not just mana base, but cards in general.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
a lot of things just
I mean,
overlap.
that's the thing. Cards overlap. You get to play different decks because of it. Once you have Mox Opals, you can play multiple decks. You know.
Sure, you say Moxel.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I see how it is.
Mox Opals
No
is
love
always
for
my example.
no
I mean,
love for the Inkmoth Nexus.
I could pull out the Masterpiece Mox Opal I have, but you know, is that necessary?
No,
I don't think so.
no, I don't think so either. I mean, but as I'm saying,
I'm just saying my
there's
love
very
for
few
it.
decks.
Just
Yeah,
saying.
I know you love your affinity, but yeah, there are very few decks that don't overlap. Now, the other thing to think about with in terms of cost restriction is how much will the deck change.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of people currently are talking about how Dredge needs to be cut down a little bit by bans or restrictions or something like that, and you know, same thing goes for Infect. You don't want to pick up a deck and say, "Hey, I'm gonna build Dredge," which I think what Golgari Grave Trolls are how much, like
I have no
20 something a
idea.
piece. I think I can actually pull it up right here. But you don't want to buy into a deck and then see it banned, and then it'd be terrible because
It is the
all the
worst
cards
feeling.
would lose value. Hold on, Golgari Grave Troll.
I mean, like,
Golgari Grave Troll is currently running around $25 a piece. So that's $100 right there just to build just to have the four trolls in the deck.
now there's a lot of other pieces that will actually overlap, but that's not an overlap piece.
Yeah, no, of course it's not. But what I'm saying is like, do you want to buy into a deck that is going to change often, such as Jund changes fairly often. I know that I think there's an article by Todd Stevens right now that has Chandras in the main board because of
Mm-hmm.
anger, because they're moving into more of a red build. Um, I mean, if you're looking for a deck that's fairly consistent, that doesn't change often, I mean, Affinity really doesn't change at all. I mean, Inventor Sphere was the biggest change I think that
I
they've
mean,
had in the
everyone,
past 3 years.
you have like three different builds of it, and if you like all the builds are basically the same expensive cards in them, and then they just have like different numbers. of
different numbers of and little cards too. Like
spells. Like yeah,
yeah,
like scent cards. Like nothing that.
yeah. I mean, for me, like Infect, that deck doesn't really change that much. I think um, the only change recently has been Blossoming Defense,
Mhm.
and that's about it. But I mean, I've been playing pretty much the same build since Become Immense came out.
Right.
Um, like those types of decks, they don't change that much. So they're usually they're a safer build because you're not once you put that money into it, you're not going to have to take a lot of it out, and you're not going to have to keep buying into something. I know that like Jund when Kalitas came out, they ran it, and that's a $23 card. You know,
Right.
Chandra's
Right.
currently a I think $13
I mean,
card.
those
I mean,
things
if you want to,
happen, but like I understand. It is a lot of things. You have a budget. You know what the questions to ask. What's your budget? Probably is number one.
no, I don't believe that. I think I think your first question really should be what deck do I play that fits my play style? Because
Okay.
like you can like after budget is secondary to that, I think. Like if you know that you are a Jund player through and through, then your budget will fall into that and you'll figure out when you're actually able to buy into it.
Right. You'll find a way.
But you
That
don't
makes
want to buy
sense.
into another deck
Yeah, that
just
makes
because
sense.
it's
I
like
agree.
Jund.
I agree.
So I honestly think your first five questions to yourself is it should be um what is my play style
Mhm.
and what deck fits that play style. After that, you should you should ask yourself how much time do I have to build it, because time is
Yes. Yeah.
relative to cost and everything else. Uh, After that, it really should be the meta that you're in.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to be playing burn when I'm playing blue white fort decks all the time because blue white fort has I don't know this thing called Leyline of Sanctity.
Mhm.
um, Also, your skill level within a certain deck should be the next consideration. How
Mhm.
familiar you are with the deck, how much you can learn about it, and again, that fits all with play style as well. And finally, the last thing I always say it should be cost restriction.
Okay.
Um, your budget should be the last thing on the list. If you find the perfect deck for yourself and you know that this is the deck that you
Right.
want to run,
You'll eventually be able to build it.
exactly. It should never be, well, I want to play this deck and I know that it's perfect, but I don't have the money for it right now, so I'm going to go buy another deck. You know what I mean?
Oh
Like,
no,
I'd
I agree.
rather build up.
I haven't done that. I'm just saying.
Yeah. I mean, I'd rather build it, and I'd rather build it and take the time to build it. And while I'm taking the time to build it, I can read up on it. I can read what changes might be coming to it, so I know,
Mhm.
as long as you know the core set of cards that you have to get, those are typically the most expensive ones. So for Infect, it would be, Infect's kind of a bad thing, but for Infect, it's your Noble Hierarch, your Ink Moth Nexus, and then you have
Your might double
um,
process.
Might of Crosha, Become Immense,
Mhm.
and shockingly, Infect is once you get outside of those major cards, it's pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Glistener Elves aren't that much. Light
Everything's under
Agent,
$10 from there.
yeah. So I mean, once you get those core cards set, and those core cards, unless a ban happens, they're not going to change. Like same thing with
Mhm.
Affinity. You're looking
Yeah.
at Arcbound Ravager, Mox Opal, Inkmoth Nexus, Blinkmoth Nexus, um, Master of Ethereum. Although that kind of changes every once in a while,
It's
I've
like
seen.
$4. So
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like your core cards, they don't change that
Steel
often.
Overseer.
Steel Overseer
Yeah.
is another one. Yeah,
But I mean,
like
like Master of Ethereum is a changer. Uh, but when you get the deck, you should pick up three Master of Ethereum. And you should pick up four Etch Champion. That's just what you should do when you pick up that kind of deck. And that's what that's a good consideration when selecting a deck is you if you see multiple iterations of that deck, pick up those cards from the multiple iterations. Don't be cheap and say this version only has three Etch Champion, so I'm only gonna buy three Etch Champion. If this version has four, try out the different versions. Those different
yeah,
versions are going to be good on different weekends. There's a reason I have my affinity deck, and then I have a binder, a little binder, with all the sideboard cards slash changes I can make to my affinity deck. That includes all the that includes 4 Edge champions in my collection. But
Mirror
sometimes I only
Enforcer.
play 3. No Mirror Enforcer, no. That do not include that. But then I include like
It
4.
is a consideration, though.
I include 4 Galvanic Blasts in that,
Frogmite.
but they don't always play 4 Galvanic Blast. But I also include 4 Thoughtcast. Not playing Thoughtcast right now. It's just that sort of thing where you have these cards that are in the optional versions or different builds. Get all those cards when you're getting the deck. Don't be like, oh, I can skimp on getting one of those because so and so. Cyber cards, yes, they change. You're gonna have to pick up cards for that. But have the core of the deck. Have the core few versions of the deck. That means when you go to any tournament, you can just say, I'm gonna switch to this version. I want to try this for the weekend, or I want to try this for Friday Night Magic, or I want to try this online for this league. Switch it up. If you,
I mean, one of the worst things that I've had happen to me is like engineered explosives
yes.
is $42 right now on Moto,
Mm-hmm.
give or take. I had the opportunity to pick them up back when they were like 21,
Yeah.
I think it was, and I only picked up 2, and now I have to pretty much pick up another entire playset, in terms of value for it. Like cards will
Mm-hmm.
go up, cards will go down, but it's always better, I think, just to, and this is outside of standard because standard prices are just
Oh yeah.
so.
Don't worry about it. Yeah, that's different.
But I mean, it's always good to pick up the playset because if there's going to be a time when a deck will come out and it will have the 4th one or the 3rd one, and you'll sit there and be like, man, why didn't I pick that up when I had the chance?
Mm, yeah, and
And
I make the
that
mistake a
really
lot.
does.
I make that mistake a lot, but I'm just trying to share what I have been mistaken from what I have done. But
Oh yeah, no, I've done the same thing, and as I said with the freaking engineered explosives, I'm kicking myself in the butt about that.
yeah.
Like, there are just certain cards that are sideboard staples,
Yeah. Well, like
like
for instance, I didn't pick up
of anything.
I didn't pick up any Blood Moons when I picked up my Affinity deck, even though that's a sideboard
Oh,
staple. So that sort of thing, or I didn't pick up any
didn't pick up blood.
Chalices. So I mean, I finally
Does
I finally got mine, but
does
I
Affinity play Blood Moon?
I play one in the sideboard sometimes.
Interesting. Even though it shuts off your Nexus and your Link Moth?
But sometimes it just kills the opponent. Against
Fair.
it's like against Tron, if you just land it turn 2, you win.
Oh, you don't. Oh, I've seen someone like play through that.
No, but you have enough pressure because you're at Affinity.
But like um when I built my version of Affinity, which is probably not the best one, but
That's
when I
right.
did, and I went to go and build it, and I said, what cards have I ever seen in a sideboard or in the deck of Affinity?
There's so many
And
sideboard cards.
I picked up Lodestone Golems, like in addition to, like, you're laughing at me, and I know this. But you sit there sometimes and you're like, well, how can Lodestone Golem not be good? Because
Because it's 4
it's like a
mana.
Thalia for
It's
everything
4
else.
mana, though.
We've had this discussion, Z.
I know.
How 4 mana cards are like the bane of your existence and should never, ever, ever, ever be played.
Nope.
Says Cryptic Command.
I there's like
Force of
a
Will.
few. There's a few good decks for it, and that's it.
Siege Rhino.
It's not even good in
Sorin.
modern anymore.
Sorin. Nahiri.
I mean, like there are very few. The 4 mana rule is there are exceptions, but the 4 mana rule is strong.
Master Waves.
That's an exception, yeah.
Elspeth.
Another exception.
Stormbreath Dragon.
Not great.
Chandra.
Except there are exceptions. I'm telling.
Hey, don't tell Scred players that Stormbreath Dragon isn't great.
Okay, fair. Although they weren't playing Scred, I don't think this weekend were they? Were they on the Scred?
That was 2 weekends ago, wasn't it? Where I won.
No, I won this weekend. Last weekend. Were they playing the Stormbreath Dragon list one? Because there's a Stormless
They
Dragon.
had Stormbreath Dragon.
Oh, they
in it.
did. Okay. Because there was a Dragon list Scred that was going around for a little while.
And then they realized that Stormbreath Dragon is great because they can't path anything
Yeah, I mean, it's a strong
or
card.
helix it or anything else.
It's a strong card. But
Let's see. What else is a 4 mana staple, Z?
You can prove me wrong all day, but I mean,
Supreme verdict.
so that I'm just saying,
Restoration Angel.
I'm just saying, like there's a four
Thraktos.
mana rule in Modern. It has to be very good, and all those cards are very good. I'm just like a mediocre four mana card is like Lone Stone Golem is not going to take over a game. All right,
Ad nauseum.
enough with the discussion about that. That's basically our wraps up our topic for today. With selecting a deck. So I hope you enjoyed the discussion. If you have any points that you would like to talk about, any questions, any disagreements you have, you can.
Who would ever disagree with us? See.
I mean, lots of people. So,
Oh
but
yeah, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people disagree with the fact that 4 mana spells are bad.
I listened to some podcasts about that, but
No,
for another
I
time.
get it. I get where it's coming from. But yeah,
But
yeah.
you can either you can check us out on Twitter if you want to shoot us a question, shoot us a comment. You can also just follow us on Twitter. I'm at Zmagic94.
You can also follow us on Twitch, where both of our Twitch names are exactly the same,
Yeah, and he's
as
Amurphs.
listed right up there.
Yep, above us.
Mine's there.
Yep. So ask us questions there. Ask us questions on Twitch. Check us out on Twitch. We stream on Twitch at the above usernames. We also are.
Also, check out our affiliated groups in MTGO Rogues at the Rogues Gallery, and also Team NFG Bot, because I know Z has an issue saying NFG.
I mean, the team. What's with the name, Murph? What's with the name?
I thought it was Team NFG. I honestly did. When we first joined up with them, I thought it was Team NFG, and I thought that
And
it was
you're
a
okay
Team
with that,
NFG.
right? You're okay
I
with
was
that.
okay with Team NFG.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
they have bots, so I thought that Team NFG bot was literally the Team NFG bot.
Right. Right.
So I don't know. Like, we'll figure it out. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
It's a
But
work in progress. We're going.
if you're watching this from YouTube, check out teenageggbot.com. Also check out the MTG Rogues. And if you're watching from either of those, check out the YouTube channel for other videos for drafts and other things that are to come. We're going to do weekly. And next week's topic is.
Navigating modern leagues, and I know we touched on this subject quickly here with sideboards and everything else, but yeah, just current state of the meta for modern leagues and what we've seen and how really to best navigate them and what times to play.
Mm-hmm. So, thanks for joining us tonight, or whatever time of the day you're watching this, and we'll see you next week.